All right. Hello and welcome everyone to another live, incredible Facebook Live video in my group, the Portrait Photographers Resource. We always have a pretty special guest, but this one today is an absolutely incredible, ultra talented artist. I want to introduce you all to the man, the myth, the legend, Jason Vinson. Jason, say hi to the world.
What's going on? Hi, everybody. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, I am super excited to have you here too, man. I've been following your work for years, honestly. I think ever since I started using Magmod, I just have been absolutely blown away by the creativity of your work. And I refer to you whenever people ask me like, "Oh, who's Jason Vinson?" or what's he about? I like to tell people that you are probably, in my opinion, one of the most like naturally creative people I've ever met in my entire life, and you see the world in such a unique way that it honestly just blows my mind.
That's funny. That's funny you say that because one of the presentations I gave this last year at WPPI is called "I'm Not Creative."
The irony, and I do remember seeing that actually on the list of classes, because I try to keep up with all the people I follow in the industry and fellow Magmon ambassadors and all that. I always try to kind of keep up with what they're doing, and I saw that, I'm like, that is kind of ironic because I find him to be one of the most creative people ever. What was your class about?
Um, Basically, it lines out kind of my process for how I developed an eye for seeing light, recreating light, and stuff like that. And basically, the whole idea is that like everything that I do, I'm not coming up with it on my own. It's all inspiration from other things that I've witnessed, and I've just kind of developed a way to see it and implement it in different ways, basically.
Awesome. Gotcha. Well, that makes complete sense. That makes complete sense. Well, for those of you who do not know Jason, and for those of you who don't know you, excuse me, could you give us a little bit of some insight on who you are, what you're about, and just kind of give us a little rundown on who Jason Vinson is?
Okay, yeah. So let's see. So got my first camera in 2010. Started off as a husband and wife team, and we still are a husband and wife team. Just since we've had kids, the wife doesn't shoot as many weddings, but she still helps a ton on the back end and all of that fun stuff. Um, from there, let's see. I like to describe my style as like authentic moments and epic portraits. So the majority of the day is kind of like documentary work and stuff like that, and then we do obviously a handful of portraits sprinkled throughout the day. But I mean, I'm mostly known for my portraits, but my passion is documentary work.
That's awesome. Yeah, and we're actually going through some of your photos right now on your website, and
Okay, cool.
I absolutely love your use of color, your documentary moments, as you said, and I find it kind of ironic that you say authentic moments, because I started a second brand last year, and we're called Authentic Moments Media. I
Oh,
don't know if you
nice.
knew that. Yeah,
No, no.
so yeah, it's this is amazing, Jason. Besides weddings, which seem to be kind of your bread and butter, or maybe this is your answer, but what would you say your favorite subject to photograph is?
My kids.
Your kids. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and before we hopped on this live video, you were telling me a little bit about your project that you do every year. Could you talk a little bit about what that's about?
Yeah, for sure. So in 2020, when quarantine hit, as part of like some of the side stuff that I do a lot of like gear reviews and articles, some YouTube stuff, some articles for f-stoppers. But I had a lens that I needed to review, but it was quarantine, so I couldn't actually go out and shoot. And so I decided that I was just gonna take this lens and shoot around the house. And so I did just some like documentary stuff every day for a few days. And then when I was done with the lens, I put a lens that I just enjoyed using more, and I just kind of kept doing it, and it just became this thing where I'd shoot every day and I'd share those images like every day until it became around 50 days where I did it every day for 50 straight days, and I was like, oh, this feels like a good place to kind of end this project. But I got a lot of really positive feedback for it, and then as the months went on, looking back at the work that I had created, I realized how important those moments and memories were for me and my wife and like our family and stuff like that. And so I decided to start doing that every year. And so ever since then, every year I do a project where I just document my kids every single day. for 50 straight days, and then I turn it into a slideshow. I share some of my favorite images on Facebook, and then I turn it into an actual like printed album of my favorite images. And so the kids will have basically like a yearbook that they can go and they can open up this book, and they can flip through it and see what life was like in 2020, 2021, 2022, and so forth.
That's super cool. I absolutely love that. Do you think, would you say that you think it's important that as creatives, sometimes we get so wrapped up in the business, or I should say the people like you and I who are doing this full time, do you think it's important for us to try to keep that passion alive by doing personal creative projects?
Absolutely. I think it's not only a good way to help you grow as an artist and just always be behind the camera, um, but I just think it's important in general to have, you know, images for yourself, whether that be you
Yeah,
taking those photos or other having other photographers take those photos for you. Like I know a lot of people that, they get family portraits every year from other photographers and they just like trade services. So like maybe if you live near me, like I would shoot your family, you'd shoot my family kind of thing if you didn't want to like spend the money on it type of thing. But
sure.
I feel like it's like that saying, right? Car mechanics, like the car mechanics always have the worst cars, right? Because they don't have the time or the resources to put into their cars, or they spend so much time fixing other people's cars that they don't actually spend the time on their own cars, right? And that's like
Right.
every profession, especially photographers. Like they spend so much time documenting people's families and telling other people about how important it is to have their moments documented that they don't actually live that truth, essentially.
Yeah, that's actually a great analogy for sure, which makes perfect sense. So, to kind of move the conversation along a little bit, and before we start jumping into these image critiques, you have many accolades under your belt. You were number one photographer in North America for Fearless. You've won many awards with ISPWP and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You have a lot of achievements and accomplishments that anyone would be absolutely stoked on. But for you, what would you say your biggest professional achievement of your career is? Was there like one defining moment, whether it was an award or a title or a sponsorship that you got that really kind of you sat back and thought to yourself, "Damn, I'm pretty proud of myself." Was there a moment like that?
I don't know. Like I'm happy and proud of all of the stuff that I've done, but I don't know if there's a single one that's like a standout. Like I feel like
Yeah,
it's kind of like you're always chasing that next high. So like
right.
you get one Fearless Award and you're like, I now I got to get two, or you get like three in a round. You're like, now I got to try and get four in a round. And so you're always trying to like, for me at least, I'm always trying to like push myself to what that next boundary is, or what that next accolade could be. Um, which is sort of like this this year actually it's sort of the reason why I took a step back. Like I'm not entering any Fearless Awards this year. I entered ISPWP. I kind of kept up with that one, but some other ones I haven't done any sort of entering on that because I decided to go ahead and just kind of take a step back and try. And not that I ever found that I was shooting primarily for an award, but I did find myself starting to get disappointed when I wouldn't win an award. Like I almost felt like I deserved it or something like that. And so for me, it just made sense to just kind of take a little bit of a step back and not put so much emphasis into that. Not that I put a ton of stuff into it, but just not as much as I was. That makes sense.
Yeah, that makes complete sense actually. And honestly, I'd like to have a conversation with you at another time because I'm actually kind of struggling with the same thing. And I've taken a step back from actually submitting to competitions. The only one I've been regularly submitting to is the Wedding Photojournalists Association. But so yeah, I'd love to pick your brain on that sometime because I do find that very interesting. And that's awesome. So, and besides that, and I can completely understand what you're saying because, it's for most people, it's probably not maybe just that one like award that's so definitive for you, but it's a series of awards and it's a series of steps that you've had to take and to even get to that level. So basically, as a career, you've done some amazing things, and I'm sure you and your family are super stoked. And as I mentioned to you earlier before we hopped on, I'm absolutely honored and humbled that you decided to come on this little whatever you call it, podcast or image critique thing that I do
Video
every month.
podcast critique.
Yeah, exactly. So I started this a little over, actually, it's been about 2.5 years now since I started this, and we've had some absolutely incredible talent on here, and you fit right in with the level of people that we've had. So thank you so much for your time, my dude. I
So
really
yeah,
appreciate it.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and jump into this. Now, for those of you who are new to these live image critiques, basically, Jason and I are going to go through 20 of your images that you have submitted, and we are going to give some real feedback to you. Okay. So you're not going to try to be mean or hurtful. We're just going to give you some honest critiques and how we feel like you can improve your images. And of course, as always, art is subjective. So please take everything we say with a grain of salt, even though Jason is kind of a badass and is kind of amazing. And then at the end, if you stick around, we are going to be giving away a free canvas print from Pro Prints to one randomly selected winner. So make sure you stick around. I am going to be monitoring the comments to my screen on the right. So if you see me looking over here, it's because I am reading your comments. So if you want to say hi, or you want to weigh in a little bit on the photo, or you have a question for myself or for Jason, please go ahead and put that in the comments. I will be watching them. Before we jump into this real quick, Jason, is there anything that you would like to share as far as upcoming projects or workshops or educational stuff that everyone can kind of be filled in about?
I would just say I don't have any workshops like on the books, but some are definitely going to be coming. So I would just recommend probably following me on Instagram, which it's my username here somewhere. I think it's just Vincent Images _ Jason for
Perfect.
first access as far as like announcements as far as that goes. But if you want sort of like some online premium type content, I do have a Patreon account where I share, videos every month. And so that's kind of like the best place for learning from home type stuff.
Awesome. So make sure you drop your links in the comments here or somewhere in my Facebook group so everyone
Drink as well.
can know where to find you. Yeah. And then speaking of drink, what are you drinking, by the way?
So I am drinking Space Camper Project Cynthia. It's a tropical white IPA.
Ooh, that sounds really
That's
good.
gonna grab on there. And then I have a
Nice.
refill locked and loaded here, which is a Sun Saver Brilliant IPA. Same brand, just like a different version.
Ooh, you're gonna have to link me those. Those sound really interesting. I'm a beer guy
They're from
myself.
they're from Boulevard Brewing Company, which is based in Kansas City, so it's only like 3 hours from us.
Oh, right on. Awesome. Yeah, I'm
Yep.
drinking some Hakata whiskey tonight. It is aged 10 years in sherry casks, so it's got a little bit of a sweet undertone to it. So that's what I'm drinking. So cheers to that.
Cheers.
All right, let's go ahead and get started here. So we're going to go ahead and switch my monitor, switch the view here. Give me 1 second. All right, here we go. We are live. So this first image comes from photographer Ray, just Ray. And Ray here used off-camera flash to light the model and natural light from the background. He used a medium shutter speed to give some movement blur, but to keep the rest of the image sharp, which actually is quite a good idea. But why don't you jump into this, Jason, and kind of kick things off and give your 2 cents here?
Hold on, my sorting was off. It is Ray.
No
It's the girl
worries.
with like the high kick.
Yep, you got it. You
Okay,
got it.
cool. Um, so I love the motion that you can see in the leg. So it looks like you're
Mm-hmm.
using a little bit of a lower shutter speed so you can get a little bit of motion blur in here. I do like the flash coming from behind for separation. I wish that it was the flash was pulled back a little bit further because you get a little bit of that hair light just right here above her shoulders, but you don't get anything on the top of her head. So
Mm-hmm.
if that light was pulled back a little bit more, you'd be able to get a little bit more spread so that you get a little bit more of that rim light there. I also feel like exposure wise, the ground is about the same exposure as her face. So I would love just like, just a gradient dropping the exposure by like half to a 3/4 of a stop just to kind of burn down that bottom edge.
Yeah.
Um, and then from there, I mean, just like little nitpicky things like up in the top corner, there's this like black pipe and then there's like a white line through that. That white
Mm-hmm.
line is a little bit distracting for me, as well as this like white square right above her head. So I feel like that could either be removed or just burned down just a tad. Um, my monitor's blocking the bottom of this here.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
Um, and I don't know if this is like a retouching thing or maybe it's just the way that just because the lighting's so flat, it looks like her foot is kind of like that's touching the ground. Like there's no, it feels like it's just like cut and paste there almost. I don't know if that could just be a flat lighting type thing, but it just looks a little weird down there for some reason.
Gotcha.
But
Gotcha.
again, this is a critique, so I'm being overly nitpicky.
Of course. Yeah. And as I mentioned earlier, when a lot of these photos that are being submitted are shot at a very high level. So, we're going to be critiquing almost like you were submitting this for a competition, right? So we're assuming you are at the professional level, and we are trying to give critiques on how you can elevate your images to that next step. So I would agree with everything you said. There's a couple small distracting elements like the pipe, like that square, that could be maybe touched up a little bit. I like how you said maybe that increase the exposure on her face a little bit, because generally speaking, I've mentioned this many times in our live critiques. Your eye generally will tend to go to the brightest part of the scene, right? The highlights. And there are a lot of while the image as a whole is pretty well balanced, there are still a lot of really bright parts in the scene, like the sunlight on the left wall there, that white square you mentioned, the highlights kind of on the ground behind her. So you really want to make sure that your subject, in this case this girl, is really well illuminated. So maybe even just bringing up that exposure, even just like a quarter of a stop, is really going to help really elevate her and make her pop a little bit more. So, he mentioned that he did use some flash here. I'm not really seeing too much, honestly, flash on the subject at all. In fact, it kind of looks
I
like the
thought the
whole
flash was going to be from that hair light. I think that
that
sunlight that you see on the back wall, I think that's the flash.
yeah, that's what that's kind of what I'm guessing too. I think maybe Ray was a little unclear with how he used the light, but he said he used off-camera flash to light the model. So yeah, that could either mean from the background or from the foreground. I'm not really sure, but either way, yeah, it's I do like a lot of the aesthetic choices he did to drag the shutter a little bit, to get that nice blurry bulked out background, so it eliminates some of those distractions. Overall, it's a solid image, just with a couple small nitpicks. So cool. Well, dude, Ray, thank you so much for submitting. Really appreciate it. We're going to go ahead and move on. This next photo comes from a Florida photographer, Roy Seraphin. And I actually, I really like your choice, Roy, for as far as submitting this photo, because this is a type of, I definitely see a lot of Jason Vinson inspiration here. I do. I see, the shutter drag and just kind of looking, as I mentioned earlier, kind of looking at the world from a different perspective, is really interesting. And I'm curious how he photographed this, if he used, like a rear curtain sync, to really, drag that shutter, or front curtain, and then, had the flash at the beginning of the exposure. And then it looks like maybe he did some sort of shutter drag here, but, probably, the only thing that kind of right off the bat that's maybe a little distracting to me, that's bothering me just a little bit, are two small things. And that is, this little, greater than sign is kind of ending right into his face. So I find that to be a little bit distracting. So I would have maybe had, the couple move either to the left or the right of that, or just kind of repositioned him a little bit differently. And then also her ankles are being cut off by whatever that light is. So it almost looks like, she's kind of floating there in space. But, yeah, it's an interesting photo because it is so different. It's so unique, and it kind of breaks a lot of rules, but in a good way. And I'd be curious to see what you think, Jason.
Yeah, so this is 100% something that I would do. I'm gonna agree that the greater than less than symbol going through his face is distracting compositionally. I would either put the couple on the right-hand side or the left-hand side of that sign, so that it was kind of like them and then the sign, or the sign and then them, instead of having them like in the middle of it. I would probably choose, based off of this, I would put them on the left-hand side of that sign so that I
Right.
could move to the left. That way I could try and remove whatever streaking in the bottom right-hand corner, because that streak, this like little like loopy thing in the bottom right hand corner.
Yeah.
That's really distracting for the shutter drag. It's just pulling my eye away from the couple. And then from here, the biggest thing that I would change here is the light placement. You have the light on the ground, firing up at the wall. So what that's doing is that's drawing my eye down here towards her ankles. And so you want that hot spot to be around them as the couple, which is hard with the pose that you have, because normally the way that I would pose a couple in this situation is that they would be like hips touching, looking towards each other so that I could hide the light and the stand behind their bodies. But I do love this pose. I would just deal with the fact that you could see the light and the stand and just know that I'm going to have to Photoshop that out.
Right.
Or I would put it to the left or right, hide it behind one of their bodies, and then just angle the light to left or right so that it was firing at the center. That way the hot spot is going to envelop their silhouettes. Also with this type of image, so like the actual silhouette of their faces is probably one of the most important things. So you want to be able to see like the full profile of their face. And so you actually need the guy to drop his shoulder and lift his chin up just a tad
Chin up.
so that you
Yep.
can see his entire jawline, because his face and his chin are melded.
Oh, Jason, we just lost audio for you.
Oh, thank you. I
There you
hit the
go.
mute button while I was
You're
talking with my hands.
you're
Um,
good.
So his face is molding into his shoulder. And then from there, just kind of some like simple retouch thing, like I love the streak at the top half of the frame,
Hmm.
but it's just a little bit too bright in comparison to the light levels on the light that's on the wall behind them. And so I would just burn down the top just a tad, make sure that the brightest thing in the frame is going to be the light that's behind them. And then I would also probably go in and dodge up the symbol as well as this like ghost version of the symbol, just to kind of pop that up, just
Yeah.
because I like that. I like that you can kind of see the lit version of the symbol plus the drag version of the symbol, and kind of like the ghostly image of them. I would maybe pull that up a little bit and add a little contrast so you can kind of see them in two different places, because I think that's interesting.
Yeah, and that's awesome advice and very good advice as well about the chin. When you're doing, profile shots, silhouetted shots of couples, any sort of backlighting, it is very important that, you can see the full profile of their chin. You're watching their shoulders, you're watching their arms, because if not, if you don't have the definitive, body shape, it's just going to look like one big blob, and that's not flattering for anyone. So, yeah, great advice. Couldn't agree with you more on everything you said. So thank you so much, Roy, for submitting a photo that does not suck. All right. Moving on to Radon Burton. This was, nope, she didn't provide any info on how she shot this, but looks like some sort of fitness shoot here. I'm just kind of taking a look at this image here. So one thing I'm seeing kind of right off the bat, an aesthetic choice that I can certainly appreciate is that she did make the conscious decision to light the upper half of the subject, because generally speaking at a gym like this, you're going to get a lot of distracting elements on the floor, so it brings more attention to, her facial expression and everything. My probably, and this is more an aesthetic choice or more of a creator's choice, but I would probably choose to light this just slightly different. Go a little bit more dramatic when you're doing fitness shoots like this, because when you're generally showing, doing photos like this where you are trying to highlight, someone's strength or someone's muscles, you want to really do everything you can to create more definition in their muscles. More so for men, but certainly with women too, you would like to do it, especially when a fitness style shoot like this, but maybe getting a little bit more dramatic with the lighting, having a little bit more split lighting or having the lighting a little bit higher to create some more definition, would certainly be beneficial here. I guess my main point is I would probably choose a slightly different lighting situation. I'm also, speaking of lighting, I'm also not quite sure how I feel about the light on the flag in the background. I do like that she chose to illuminate it. However, one thing I'm finding a little distracting is the light is actually kind of highlighting some of the see what I did there? Some of the flaws of the flag, so you can tell it was folded. You got those ripples, and to me, I kind of find that a little distracting. So I would either, in post production, try to find a way to remove those creases because I do find them quite distracting, or I would have just shot this maybe a little bit, little slightly differently, maybe even opened up my aperture a little bit just to blur off that background. But as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I mean, art is subjective, and there's really, in my opinion, there's really nothing wrong with this image or how it was shot or how it was lit. Those are just a couple suggestions I would probably make. But Jason, I'm going to let you talk a little bit more about what you think, and then maybe if there's something about the pose as well that you think could be a little bit, or achieved a little bit better.
Okay. Yes. So I like the light on the flag. Um, I would just, I agree that the wrinkles could be a little distracting, but I would still continue to light the flag. I would have just retouched out those wrinkles.
Yeah.
Or if it's something that you had the ability to do, like if you hung that flag, I would have just brought a steamer or ironed out that flag.
Yeah.
But honestly, like retouching wise, that's maybe a 5-minute job to retouch those wrinkles out, so it's not a big deal. But I do like the fact that flag is lit. I do like the hair light, and I love that the hair light is a little bit different of a color than the main light. I think what is right now, the main light needs to be the fill light, and it needs to be dropped down about a stop to 2 stops, and you need to add another light that is at a more dramatic angle to kind of give some definition, maybe somewhat of like a Rembrandt lighting, to where you can kind of see just like a pocket of light on her eye and kind of accentuate her jawline a little bit more.
Agreed.
But with that dramatic of a lighting situation, you don't want her entire foreground, like her entire body to go into shadow. So I do think you need to keep the light that you have here. It just needs to be less bright, as sort of like a fill light instead of the main light, and the main light just needs to be a little bit more dramatic. Pose wise, I don't see anything wrong with it. I don't know, like I'd have to see like the movement and what she looked like doing this type of movement and stuff like that, with if like her arms like this or down low or whatever, like what that looked like as far as like her arms in tone and stuff like that goes. I would have like, being super nitpicky, this like bunch up of cloth from her shirt on the back of her shoulder, and then the wrinkle on the back is a little bit distracting for me as well, because it just kind of takes away from her form. It makes her shoulders look bigger than they actually are, but not in like a muscular good way. So I would have just maybe like just made sure to adjust her shirt before she gets ready, or just kind of like finesse that away. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah,
I'd also be interested to see what something a little bit wider looked like.
Yeah, absolutely. And to kind of touch up on the pose a little bit, speaking purely from a fitness standpoint, I went to the gym once, so I have a ton of experience on this. But basically, for these tricep extensions, basically you're working the tricep with this move, right? So the best from a fitness standpoint, the shot that she would more than likely want to see during this exercise is when she at full extension. So when those ropes are all the way down. So basically when you're at the bottom of the extension, that's what's going to make the tricep muscle right here pop out a little bit. So that's going to be your bet from as a fitness photographer and a fitness model, that's going to be your best shot for this type of exercise. So that would probably be my suggestion, Radon, is if you haven't already submitted this to your client or whatever, make sure you include some of those photos, because speaking from the perspective of your subject here, she's probably going to want to see those. So yeah, that would be my suggestion. But hey, thanks Radon for submitting this. This is a cool shot, and it's one of the more. It's a little bit different than what you usually submit. Usually she submits a lot of photos with like the mountains in the background, very similar to kind of the stuff I do. She's in Wyoming, so it's really nice to see you out of your comfort zone a little bit, Radon, with the images you're submitting and sharing this with us. So thank you so much. Okay, so moving on. This one comes from Frank Sorger. And let's see here. Yep, looks like we're on the right image. Okay. I'm seeing, and let me know if you're seeing this a little bit, Jason, but I'm seeing like really, obviously very sharp eyes, but then kind of like a loss of detail in the rest of the image. and I'm wondering if it's just because of the compression, or if there was something, with the editing. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it was just a little bit overly retouched. Because
Okay.
like right below her nose, you can see texture, but to the side, that texture completely goes away.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I do think the retouching as far as like the skin smoothing is a little bit um, too much. Like I'm all for smoothing out transitions and all of that fun stuff, but you want to make sure that you keep some of that texture. And you can kind of see it up. So the right eye, right below, you can kind of see like the those eyelashes are real sharp, but they have kind of like some haloing, like that, like where it was kind of brushed in a little bit too much there.
Yeah.
I'm also seeing where I love that it's like a close-up shot where her hair kind of fills in the rest of the frame. But I can see where you cloned in pieces of hair to fill in the frame. So in the top right-hand corner, I can see where there's like repeating segments of hair to fill in that top part of the frame, as
Yep.
well as like in the middle right of the frame, you can kind of see where it's like sharp, blurry, sharp, and so you can kind of see where
Yep.
some of these cloning lines are. So just I'm totally fine with like filling in sections with hair to kind of to complete the image, but you just want to make sure that you're doing that very carefully to make sure that that's not standing out. Because if I can see it on my computer screen with a compressed image, if you print this, it's going to be even more noticeable. Um, but as far as like eye detail, I do love that the eyes are like super poppy and like have a ton of contrast in comparison to the rest of the frame. Um, and I do like the overall composition. It almost looks, if you look at her right cheek, it almost looks like it's um like you can see the end of her cheek and then like there's like a double line there.
It's like a
So I don't
ghosting
know.
effect almost.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's like a weird ghosting, fringing thing going on. I don't know if that's part of the retouch or if it was like a makeup thing, but it looks probably like it was part of a retouching thing.
Yeah, I think what's throwing me off is on this image a little bit is the natural progression of the fall off from the from your focus, your focal point is a little is doesn't make sense a little bit to me. So, and what I mean by that is, you look at so I guess her right eye, so the one that we're looking at on the left side, and that's sharp, and then you look at the one on the right and it's just as sharp. However, when you look at everything else around that eye, such as her eyelashes, her cheek, it's all completely out of focus. So the focal plane doesn't really make much sense to me, which means to me that potentially, they the photographer over sharpened that eye to make it pure, like the eyes were in focus. Because if you were to shoot this, naturally with no retouching, her right eye, or excuse me, her left eye would be a little bit soft and a little bit out of focus compared to the one in the foreground or that's closest to us. So I guess for me, that's maybe throwing it off a little bit as well. But I think just the what you said, the retouching is just leaves a little bit of improvement. And now that you pointed out, that those clone areas, it's very obvious to me. It's very apparent.
Oh, I can actually see where they cloned the pupils from one side to the other.
Yeah,
That's why it's
you
so
can see that
sharp.
catch. Yeah, you can see that catch light a little
And
bit.
you can see the irises are the exact same in
Yep.
certain areas.
Yeah, exactly. So I noticed that right away, for sure. Okay. Well, cool. And I kind of like I do like the idea of turning it into black and white. That's just, to me, it just kind of removes a little bit of those, yeah, it's just, with a black and white image, you kind of remove any color, judging a photo based on color, and you're looking at more of just the expression and the emotion. So, interesting choice for sure.
Definitely like this as a black and white image.
Yeah, I agree. All right, moving on. But hey, thank you so much for submitting this. Really, really appreciate it, Frank. We're going to go ahead and move on to Scott Tibbles. Now, this is an image Scott took at a wedding, and it was a 4-shot composite. So he used a blue gel for the background, 24-inch softbox with a 300-watt strobe. He used a modeling light to make sure that he nailed the focus, held over the top to light the couple and the candles. He added flames in post-production since they were battery operated, and this was shot outside on a sidewalk. And then before we critique this here was kind of a behind the scenes shot for all of you. Scott was nice enough to include a behind the scenes shot of how we lit these subjects individually. So, and then here again is the final result. So, kind of, if I can jump in real quick and start here, I want to address an issue that Scott, I'm gonna tear you up a little bit here. I'm gonna address an issue that I see on a lot of your photos, and I'm gonna keep drilling you on it until you get it perfect. But really, really watch those highlights, man. You know, especially for example on this bride right here. You know, she's got a really strong highlight on her forehead. The groom, his shirt by his tie, really overexposed highlights. He's got a little bit of specularity on his forehead as well. But then you kind of look like on his sleeve, for example, and the highlights on his sleeve don't match the highlights on his chest. So it looks like maybe you did retouch it a little bit, but then you forgot that part. So just make sure with your highlights, you're a little bit more consistent, and you're also watching those as well as you're lighting these subjects. So that would be my biggest critique. This more of an aesthetic personal choice. I would personally remove, or not necessarily remove, but take down the exposure just a tad on the ground. So you remove a little bit of distracting elements such as the green grass. It's fine. It's not necessarily going to make or break the image, but I feel like, you have such a strong, powerful blue from your gel here that maybe just toning down those highlights on that grass a little bit is just going to bring even more attention to what you're trying to highlight in your scene. But other than that, I kind of like the pose. I like they're both holding, matching glasses, and they kind of got this like kingly vibe to them, which is matched perfectly or paired perfectly with the chairs. So really good job there. My only, now that I'm looking at this some more, I do have one more comment, and that is the light on the chair that he's sitting on doesn't match the light on the chair that she's sitting on. So I would try to create some consistency between those two, just to create a little bit more balanced of an image. That's what I got. What do you got, Jason?
I agree. So I like the lighting that's on them. I think it just on her, the light just needs to be pulled forward just a tad bit more so that
Mm-hmm.
you don't have as much of the kind of raccoon eyes.
Right.
But as far as like that top-down lighting, I do like that. I think it just needs to be pulled forward just a tad and then angled a little bit more towards her so that it can just kind of fill in under her eyes just a tad bit more. But I do like the directionality of it. I know he said that he photoshopped in the flames, which is going to be something that I brought up because I can see where the two right-hand flames are the exact same, just mirrored with each other. Um, or the far right and the far left flame, you can tell that they're just mirrored versions of each other. So even if you didn't Photoshop those in, I can tell that they're the exact same. So the only thing I would recommend, like, it's fine to use the same thing, and I like that you mirrored it to kind of hide that a little bit, but I would have just gone in with a little bit of a liquify tool and just kind of tweak it just a little bit to give it a little bit of a different curve, so that it wasn't so apparent that you use the same flame there. I also would I agree that the tops of the chairs, it would be nice to have those have the same lighting. Um, and I think that the padding of the chair that they're on, I don't know if it just needs to be a little darker, or I think it's just the one that she's on just needs to be lit more evenly because it's just distracting there.
Yeah, and actually, now that you're saying that, I'm seeing if you look on him, like right below where his leg is crossing and sitting on his knee, you have some like extra material there.
I can actually see where there's like a transition on his leg there.
Yes, yes,
Like you can see the color where there's like a line, like it's two different things cloned
yeah,
together, maybe.
yep. So that is interesting. Yep, good. Yeah, good catch for
And then
sure.
also just because this is a composite that obviously has a good amount of Photoshop work done to it, I would go ahead and just take out the doorknobs that are in between them in the background because those are distracting just because they're brighter elements than everything. They don't need to be there.
Yeah. Oh, good point. Good call for sure. Yeah. And now I'm looking at this image now on three monitors actually right now. I'm looking at all three of my monitors, and it's interesting how in some the highlights look a little stronger than others, but uh, I still stand by my statement just a little over. So just watch that, Scott. But yeah, I have
That's
nothing
just a
else to add.
nature, I think, from the fact that they're probably pulled off the dance floor. They're probably already a little bit sweaty, and because the light is so close, you are going to get a little bit more of that specularity.
Yeah.
One thing that you can look into there, I don't own it, but I know a good amount of people that use it. It's a retouching plugin that it uses AI, so it automatically does it. It's from a company called Retouch for Me, and it's called Mattifier, and it will take all of those specular highlights and it will mattify them so that they're not so specular. It kind of blends them in a little bit more.
Okay.
Um, it's one of those. It's one of the cool plugins that you buy it and then you get to use it as much as you want forever without having to like buy credits and all of that fun stuff. It's like $100 and you get to use it as much as you want forever. So
Right
if
on.
you do find yourself having, especially if this is a lighting style that you like a lot, then it's specular highlights is probably something that you deal with a lot, and so it might be worth looking into. And if you use code Jason, you get a discount or something, or
Ooh.
don't use it. I don't care. It's a good plugin, so whatever.
There you go. And can you say the name of it one more time?
It's retouch number 4 me. So retouch for me, and they have a bunch. So the ones that I use heal, dodge and burn, skin tones, and portrait volumes. And I'm probably gonna buy the mattifier one
Okay.
shortly. But the
Awesome.
other four, like anytime I do families, high school seniors, all that fun stuff, I basically edit the entire gallery and then I run the entire thing through the plugin. I just hit run, let it run through all of them, and just let it run for like an hour. Come back and the entire gallery is retouched
Oh
automatically.
wow. That's awesome. Very cool.
Yep.
Awesome.
The
Well,
only thing you
Scott,
have
as
to be
always.
careful of is if you use the heal one, is it doesn't know the difference between like a pimple and a mole, or sometimes like an
Okay.
earring or like a necklace. Sometimes it'll retouch like a stone off the necklace. So if you have situations like that, then you might want to have to do those ones manually. But if the person doesn't have those types of characteristics, you can just run it through everything. You can just batch run it.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Very cool. Retouch for me. Check it out, guys. Yeah, Scott, thanks so much for submitting. As always, we're gonna go ahead
Awesome.
and
It's
move
awesome.
on.
It's awesome. Love it.
Yeah, really, really cool concept for sure. This next photo looks like we got another silhouette here. This comes from John Hawking. This was a high school portrait that he captured. So after he did kind of the more traditional ones, he used her high school colors to do a silhouette holding her graduation cap. The cheetah used a cheetah stand light stand with a green magma gel and a sphere, an 8200 with a Canon R5. He did shoot this at high speed sync since it was daylight. 112 50ths of a second, f10, ISO 100. Perfect. Okay. I can't remember. Did you start last time, or or did I start? You started last time.
I think you started last time, but
No,
go
I
ahead.
did start. Okay, it doesn't really. Yeah, it's not too matter. It doesn't matter too much. But yeah, this is cool. This is cool. I like the technical part of this, John. You know, the green was a great idea. Holding the cap up was a good idea, and I like how it's really well balanced, and you nailed the exposure. So good job there. Probably what I would like to see here is something a little bit more interesting with the pose. So maybe introducing a little bit of movement would really elevate this image a lot more. So one thing you could have done, and this is just an example or an idea, one thing you could have done is maybe like have her jump up, right? Kick her feet back, throw her cap in the air, because she just looks a little static here. And it's not from a pose standpoint, it's not very exciting. The lighting and the silhouette, I think is a great idea, but she just looks. I mean, you can tell just by her the way her mouth is, or just her facial. You know what you can see of her facial expression. It just very, just very kind of boring. But other than that, I mean, from a technical standpoint, it's cool. It's unique. It's creative. Just work on that pose, introduce some movement, add some more visual interest to that. What do you think, Jason?
I agree. This light placement is what I was talking about with the previous image where the flash was on the floor. This is
Yeah.
where the light needs to be. It needs to be centered on her face. Because I know where the light stand was, I know that you had to retouch out that light stand. I can see where you retouched it out a little
Barely.
bit,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
just right above her calf. Also, because you're already in there retouching, go ahead and get rid of the line from the concrete that she's standing on
Mm.
because that line that's cutting through between her calf and heel is a bit distracting. I actually almost thought that it was the light stand at first, but then I was like, oh no, the light stand was retouched, but not the line from the concrete. So go ahead and just get rid of that as well. And then as far as the pose goes, I totally agree. It does feel very static. Like you can see the tassel just like hanging straight down. I don't like it would be cool to have her jumping up and throwing it, or even if she just like threw it, but then looked at where the hat was, because again, similar to the other one, there is some separation between her chin a little bit more than the other one, but there's still not enough. I want to see the chin,
Yep.
jaw, and where the jaw meets the neck, which is hard to see because her arm is where it is. But if she were to throw the hat up and then look up at where the hat is, then you would get that separation, even though her hand is up and blocking it. So throwing the hat kind of solves two problems: the fact that the pose is static, and then also the fact that there's no separation between her chin, jawline, and neckline.
Yep. Exactly. So, um, pretty much all good points. Like I said, introducing some movement would probably solve all of those things. Bringing her chin up, showing a little, maybe showing her other arm, because right now it looks like she just has one arm. So, yeah, really,
Yeah,
yeah,
like
just
maybe
little,
like hand
yeah.
on the hip so you can kind of see that elbow with the little triangle
Mm-hmm.
coming out the back. And then also I know that you said this was shot during the daylight and you're shooting like high speed sync, these crazy settings. I know you're trying to get like this clean silhouette. But I think this would actually look pretty cool too if you just got a little bit of shadow detail so where um like it's still a silhouette, but you can still kind of see her, right? So it's not all the way black, but you can kind of see hints of her detail in the shadows. Um, the cool thing is with something like this, like you could get the deep blacks and then just pull back the shutter just to let a little bit more ambient light to get both, is what I would normally do in this situation. If I'm not sure which one's going to look best, I would just shoot them both ways. And honestly, I'd probably just end up delivering both of them that way as well. But sometimes you never know which one you're going to want. But I would
Yeah.
like to see a little bit more detail in the shadows for something like that. Like this, just because there isn't really anything else to look at, right? Besides her silhouette and this like frame. Whereas if you pull back some of the shadows, then at least you can kind of see her face and dress and things like that as well.
Gotcha. Well, cool, John. Thank you so much for submitting. As always, great. I love to see you getting more and more creative. So keep it up, man. Okay, moving on. We're gonna go ahead and show off a photo captured by Sean Reefman, and this was you. This was captured using a Magmod, Magsphere, and a grid. A very good combo. He removed the fairy light tree and replaced it with more visually appealing bokeh. Not really sure what he means by that, but I'm assuming maybe there was a tree that was in the foreground and he removed it and just replaced it with some bokeh that he composited in or something. But
Yeah, that's
um,
what it looks like. It looks like it was more of a like a almost like a double exposure after the fact.
yeah,
Um, yeah. Do you want to start or do you want
yeah.
me to start?
Um, I have. Why don't you start? I have some comments, but I started last time, so why don't you jump in?
Um, So I'm totally cool with the removing the tree, doing this like double exposure type thing. But if you're gonna do that, just go all the way. So the tree that you can, the tree limb that you can see up at the top of the frame is distracting. So because you already said you
Yep.
removed a tree, just go ahead and remove the entire tree. And because you filled in the frame with bokeh, go ahead and fill in the entire frame with bokeh. I do like the left hand side, but I feel like the right hand side is a little bit lacking. Like you could
Need
fill
some more.
in the bottom right hand corner with some of that bokeh, get rid of that tree branch and fill in that section with bokeh. And I feel like the gap between her and the bokeh is a little bit too much. Like I would almost like to see like in this bottom left middle of the frame, like some of that bokeh kind of bleed into her a little bit, like it's bleeding into him, if that makes sense. Um,
Absolutely.
and then lighting wise, I would just want the light pulled a little bit more. I would have it on the other side. So right now the light is camera right and up. I would have it camera left and up because the way the light is falling on his face, his eye falls into shadow, and then there's that awkward shadow line across his nose. So
Hmm.
if the light was on the other side, she would still get the nice light. It would just be from the other end, and then he would also get the nice light instead of his ear and back of his head getting the nice light.
Yeah, and
And
I'm
then
glad
same
you
thing as
said.
far as like, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, no, I was gonna say I'm glad you said something because I struggle with this a lot with my photos where so typically I like to light from the groom side because I want the bride to be short lit, right? Because it's generally a little bit more flattering. So I will usually always light from the groom side. However, one of the issues I run into a lot is I'll have that awkward shadow right on the tip of their nose. So for me, what I do to try to correct that is I'll either have him turn his head like a little bit more away from the camera so you get that more even light, or I'll just move the light a little bit more, a little closer to the camera, and then a little bit more camera left, just to kind of get that better light to wrap around. But you're saying to potentially maybe light it from her side, so his face is evenly lit. But then in theory, wouldn't she would be broad lit, and then she might have some weird shadows too. So it's kind of a double edged sword. You know what I mean?
I think she could have the same lighting. It's the same direction on her face. You have the same exact lighting on her face. It's just from the other end because her face is squared up to the camera, right? So
Right.
there's no, if it goes to the other side, it's a completely different lighting pattern. It's the same lighting pattern. It's just coming from the other side.
Yeah.
Now, if her face was turned, then obviously moving the light to the other side of her
Right.
face would change it. But because she's squared onto the camera, you can just move it to the other side, and she has the exact same light on her. It's just that no shadow is just going the other direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one thing you could do if you were getting kind of awkward light is you could even have her turn her chin into the light a little bit more to help remove some of those shadows. So,
And now in
yeah,
situations where if her head was turned and you were trying to short light her, like maybe her head was turned a little bit more to camera
towards him.
right, then
Yeah,
in that situation, you would still want to have the light on camera right. And again, what you said, I would just have him scoot to her left a little bit more. And instead of kissing her where his face is like right onto hers, it would be like a little bit more from behind, just so his face is turned just a little bit more towards camera.
gotcha, gotcha. Yeah. Um, so yeah, but besides that, honestly, everything you said, I was gonna absolutely mention, and I'm glad you said it. The tree in the top is distracting to me. I would add in a little bit more bokeh just to kind of help remove some of the distracting elements. Like on the bottom right, you see you have that highlight on those rocks and
Concrete.
that grass.
Yep.
Yeah. So, um, but good processing style. I like it.
I like the
Maybe just
pose. Yep.
yeah, exactly. Everything's great. I like that suit too. It's a nice color. Um, Right on, Sean. Thank you for submitting. This was your first submission here, so I really appreciate it. We're going to go ahead and move on. This next photo is from Ed Ailman. This is a portrait of Miss North Las Vegas, Iris, for her website and also for her pageant. Okay. Well, you started last time, so I will start. Um,
After it.
yeah, definitely. So I think for me, the it's almost the lighting is a little bit it's a little too flat. It's not very balanced, right? So it's just the image as a whole needs more definition, right? And I can tell, in a lot from a lot of different for a lot of different cues are telling me about this, right? So, her pupils, you have that really strong catchlight right on her iris. You have under her chin a little bit on her left side. You can see just a tad bit of a shadow. That's indicating to me that the light source was straight from the camera. I don't know if it was straight from the camera or slightly off, but basically, the easiest way you could fix this, Ed, is just by bringing that flash a little bit off camera and potentially even trying a different modifier. I'm not sure what you used here to light this, but I really think maybe using a bigger softbox that's diffused more efficiently adding some direction and really getting some shadows to create some definition of her face, and getting soft shadows is really going to do a lot of wonders for you, and make it a little bit more flattering. A couple things to touch up on the pose as well. I don't like how there's a couple things I don't like, but I don't like how her left hand is just completely flat on that book, right? There's a general rule, and Amber Henry says this a lot. If it bends, bend it, right? So her right hand's good. She's clutching those books, but her left hand is just very flat. It just looks a little bit too forced, right? So if you wanted that hand on those books still, what I would probably do is have her bring her elbow back a little bit, because having her elbow off of her body is going to create more shape and more definition in her pose. But then also it's going to make it so she has to curl her fingers a little bit. So it's not it's not so flat. It's not like she's just smacking the side of this book, basically. So that's kind of
Bad
my
book.
yeah, bad book. That's kind of my 2 cents. I think I do like how her shoulders are off. They're off, or what would be the word, off camber, or they're just basically not squared up, right? She has one shoulder that's dropped a little bit lower, which is good. But those would be my main criticisms here, or critiques, I should say. Jason, what do you have to add?
Yeah, so I mean, the lighting's fine. It's not super interesting, but it definitely is like a style. But the style is kind of like this could easily be cropped as like a passport photo. Um,
Yes, yes.
I can see I can see the camera in the catch light of in her eye, and so I know the light's behind the camera. So if you just lifted the light up a little bit, even if you like the directionality of this light, that's totally fine. But lift it up just a little bit more so you can push it closer so you can shoot underneath the light instead of having the light be back behind the camera. Honestly, like if you look at like high end Vogue and stuff like that, like this is very much a catch light that you would see in their eyes, but it's as a fill light. And so
Right.
this light would traditionally be like 2 or 3 stops lower than what it is, and then you would have a main light that's going to cause some more definition to her face, or things like that. And then yeah, same thing that you said with the pose, just the flat hand, and then retouching wise, I would just come in and make sure, just because I know people don't like it, just retouch out that bra line.
Yep. Yep, absolutely. Becky commented too. Becky McNerdy said, "Yeah, her shirt is catching her upper bra line and the reflection of the lighter color under her shirt." Yep, definitely touch that up as well. When you're doing a lot of when you're doing a lot of portraits like this, retouching is really important here. So, just just making just little tiny adjustments that are going to make a big difference. So, cool. Yeah, I had nothing else to add. That's pretty much it. I want to keep moving along here. So thank you, Ed, for submitting that. We're just running a little bit behind on where I want to be, so we're going to move on. This next photo comes from Sandra Miltenberger. This was, let's see here. This was shot with a key light, which is a Geekoto GT200. With the 26-inch Geekoto softbox. There's also another light on the bottom of her dress with a sphere, and then some uplighting with gels on the walls behind him. So I don't know if this is like actually shot in well, it looks like it's like a painting or something in the background, because,
Yeah, it's like
yeah,
a
or
painted, it's like a
mural.
mural or something.
Yeah. Um, this is really freaking cool. Well, let you start here, Jason, because I started last time. So I have some comments, but
So
I want to hear what you have to say.
similar to, a few of the previous ones, like the bottom of the frame, like something that I do a ton is burn the bottom of the frame. Like I have a preset, I just click it, it burns the bottom of the frame. And so I would just burn the bottom of the frame just a little bit more so that it's not so distracting. Like honestly, it might be a little bit brighter than the top of her dress here.
Yeah.
Um, and one of the hardest parts about shooting with, murals and paintings and stuff like that is, again, getting those specular highlights where the texture of the painting comes out. And so if you zoom in to the right of his elbow, like you can see that specular highlight from the lights and you can see the texture of the wall. Um,
Yep.
So I would try and remove not only the specular highlights but also the texture so that it matched more of what the wall was. Same thing with if you go down the octopus tentacle here, like halfway through, you can see a specular highlight with the texture of the wall. But then if you also go to the very end of the octopus, there's like some ghosting, like feathered
Yep.
edge, like the blue kind of blends in, so it looks like maybe something was retouched or cloned there, but they're like the definition of the octopus's tentacle went away with that. So just be careful with the way you're cloning or putting things into the frame there. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And then as far as the light goes, it's hard. Like the light on her feels really flat, but then the light on him feels too contrasty.
Okay.
So I'm not sure. I think it's
Yeah.
from camera right.
Yeah, because you can see the
So
shadow on her belly.
it almost needs to be a little bit more of that like boom lighting where it comes in directly overhead to light
Right.
both of them with kind of like a dramatic overhead type lighting, but just low enough and angled enough to where it kind of fills in the sockets of their eyes for something like this. If you want a dramatic lighting on them that gives them definition, which I think with the style of this, like you want some sort of drama on them. For me, if I were lighting this, like I like that you can see their faces, and I think that's a cool aesthetic. For me, I would have her and him step to camera right by about 6 inches, and I would
Yep.
frame them between the octopus tentacle and the shark, and I would light the wall and silhouette them, have them look directly at each other. And then you can still light the dress and things like that, but you would drop the exposure by at least a stop to two stops so that you can see the detail within the shadows, but the focus is going to be on them and their like silhouette in the background. And again, similar thing to the graduation photo. You can silhouette them, but still have enough detail in the shadows to where you can kind of see them. You can see that she has this cool dress that has like the exposed shoulder and ruffles and things like that. And so it's like a silhouette, but not like a black to white type of silhouette, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that about the tentacle because that's like the only thing about this photo that I would say well, there's nothing that bothers me about the photo, but the thing I would say that what I would want to change is to have him framed a little bit better because she's kind of cutting off that tentacle, and that tentacle is such a visually appealing part of this image that I want
Yeah,
to see the
for
whole
sure.
thing and I don't want to see it cut off. So I would just move camera left slightly or had them move camera right, just to frame them a little bit better. The other thing I'm just and speaking of that tentacle, this is kind of more of a personal choice, but I almost feel like it's a little out of place with the rest of the image because there's so many blue tones here, and then all of a sudden you just have this random orange tentacle. So in my opinion, and this is could be potentially a subject of controversy depending on how you feel about photo manipulation, but I would probably almost clone that and add in a second tentacle from like camera right to balance the image a little bit more. Again, just kind of a personal thing, but that's something like I kind of took out of Ivan Duran's book. You know, I had lunch with him once and he was telling me his process on how he will do photo manipulation like that for some of his images. And that's kind of what I would personally probably do here to balance the image a little bit more.
I think I like the single tentacle. I think it would just fit
Okay.
better if she wasn't cutting it off. Because honestly, like looking at it in thumbnail view, like that's the first thing that catches my eye in thumbnail view. And so
Yeah.
if like you're trying to figure out your composition and like what's drawing your eye, go into Lightroom and go into the library module and then go into grid view. Or in the develop module on the left hand side, you can make it so you can see like a little thumbnail preview. So a lot of the times I'll look at that to kind of check my composition and also check and see what's drawing my eye. Because sometimes your eye, it's there's so much to look at with such a large image that if you look at a smaller thumbnail, like now looking at thumbnail view, the bottom right hand corner of this image is too bright. Like that's the part that needs to be burned down a lot more. And then I want to see the entirety of that tentacle, and it would almost be like a leading line pointed directly at them. It'd be almost like the octopus is like pointing at them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Very cool. Awesome. Well, hey, Sandra, thank you so much for submitting this. I really appreciate it. We're going to go ahead and move
Really
on.
cool image.
Yeah, really, really cool image. This next one, this comes from Brian Green, and this was captured. Let's see here. This was actually no, he didn't submit any information behind this, so we're just gonna look at the image as a whole. Let's see. I think Brian submitted photos last month too, with some horses as well. So either he's been doing a lot of horse photo shoots lately, or he just really likes horses, if I'm remembering correctly. So I think for me, the biggest change I would like to see here is to actually crop it tighter, because you're already cutting off the horses, right? So I would focus in on the moment and what's important here. And the moment is her kissing the horse's nose, or right, or the snout. So I would like to see this cropped a little bit tighter, because otherwise you're getting a lot of distracting elements, right? You're seeing the trees, you're seeing, like just other parts of the horses that aren't really super important. That would probably be the biggest thing that I would want to see happen. I mean, yeah, and then you can obviously talk a little bit about like the highlights and everything, maybe doing some localized adjustments here to help bring down those highlights on the horses now. Looks like it might be slightly out of focus, or I'm seeing some sort of loss of detail, but what would you have to add to that?
See, and I would honestly take a step back to include all of the other horses' snout. I think one of like the the cool part is that she's kissing the horse, but I think one of the most important parts is that like this other the two horses are kind of cuddling. So I want to see all of that, but I just want to see the snout of the brown horse. And then yeah, I think it might just be like too contrasty in the contrast slider or the curve slider, where the transitions between the shadows and highlights is it's too abrupt. So you just need to lower the contrast a little bit, as well as burn down some of the highlights on that horse. And then I think just like a 5 to 10 minutes of just cloning would go a long way, as far as like little hot spots in the trees, the stuff on her hat. Um, there's a weird, I don't know if it's like, I think it's dappled light, but it's just distracting the transition between highlight to shadow on her leg to
Mm-hmm.
knee.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I think the biggest thing that I would do is just lower the contrast a little bit, take a step back, and then like 5 to 10 minutes of cloning out some of the little distractions
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. That's all I would have to add as well.
and burn down that bottom right corner.
Yep, definitely, definitely. Cool. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate you submitting. Moving on, this next photo comes from local photographer to me, Mark Creary. Oh, whoa. Hold on. I went too far. There we go. From Mark Creary. And Mark said that this guy was enjoying his first cupcake ever, and he would like for us to, he's basically curious about his the award potential of this image. So basically, he wants us to kind of critique this on at a high level. If you were to submit this like in a photojournalism category, for example. Yeah. So why don't you start, Jason?
Do you want to go first? Or is it
Why
my
don't you
turn?
start? Because I started last time. Yeah.
Okay. Um, the kid's amazing. I love the cupcake in the mouth. The part that kills this image is the dad's eyes, because there's no emotion behind him, especially comparison to the kid. Like he's just very disengaged. So I think what this image needs is a crop, and I would crop just below the
Ooh, good
dad's
idea.
glasses. But in order to do that, you're going to have to tilt the image. I could download it and let me talk about everything else, and then while you're doing your thing, I will do a crop and maybe I'll share it if I can.
Okay.
Um, if not, maybe I'll just share it in the comments later. But
Yeah,
anyway,
that's a good idea.
it just needs to be a crop just below the dad's eye line, so that you can see the dad's nose and then the cupcake, and then as much of the kid as possible without cutting off anything else. If this is already a crop, then even better, because then you have a little bit more room to adjust the tilt of it. Because yeah, I want to see only the kid and his expression, and then the dad shoving his face, and I want to get rid of the eyes. And then from there,
I think we
I
lost
think I
audio
like
again on you. Oh, no,
everything
we're
else.
good.
The dad's sleeve is very distracting with how wrinkled it is and that it's a little bit brighter. So I'd maybe just burn it down a little
Burn
bit.
it down. Yep. Hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, that was
And
exactly what I was gonna say as well. Hmm.
yeah, and then crop wise, as you're cropping out the dad's eyes, I would potentially crop to where his ear is out of it as well. So it would be like where the sideburns meet the beard across the eye line and then over the kid to get in as much of him as possible.
Yeah, and one thing I'm seeing, and I don't know if you're seeing it as well. I'm looking at on it on a pretty big screen, on a 36-inch screen here, or not 36. I'm sorry. I think I'm whatever. It's large screen. I'm seeing a little bit of like ghosting around the father's like upper lip and his hand, or almost like it was over sharpened or something. I'm just seeing like a weird. I'm seeing like a weird line
Yeah, I
there.
can see where there he used some sort of like auto mask. You can see it in the
Yes.
finger where the finger meets the
Yes.
beard, and you can see it where the his upper lip meets his teeth.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, that's bad if you're going to print this in an album or print this for wall art. When it comes to like awards, I don't know if anyone's going to notice that because you're submitting stuff at like, you know, 1080 to 2000 pixels, and so no one's going to be able to
Right.
zoom in at that level. But as far like I would definitely go in with a brush and just kind of even out those transitions. If
Yeah.
you're masking stuff out, and if he's masking stuff out, I'm assuming it's to darken the background a bit. Um, yeah, because I can kind of see now that I zoom in some brush lines across the top of the kid's head,
Mm-hmm.
in the kid's ear and stuff like that. So I think award potential wise, there is potential with a different crop and a better retouch. There's also weird, yeah, now that I zoom in, it's maybe a weird luminosity thing between the shadows and highlights on the groom's hand, and I think that's also why the sleeve is popping so much. Like maybe he pulled
Yes.
up the shadows but separated it from the highlights or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's kind of what it looks like. It looks like it was a mask.
Yeah,
And he just kind of brought up the exposure a little bit. So, to
yeah.
echo kind of what you said, yeah, bring down the exposure just a little bit on the father or the guy there, and then just fix some of those retouching things. So,
And when
um,
it comes like if what you're doing is raising the exposure of his hand and sleeve, you don't need to do that at all. I would bring it back, let that go all the way into shadow because the only thing that's important is that cupcake being shoved in his mouth. Like that's the only thing I need to see with enough detail to show that like it's a hand shoving it in there.
yep, absolutely,
Like if anything,
absolutely.
I'd want the whole hand and sleeve to be darkened down.
Right on. Cool. Well, Mark, thank you so much for submitting. Great, really good moment. Just make a couple of those adjustments, and I think you got a solid photo. Okay, this next photo, this comes from an anonymous photographer with
Anonymous,
no
love it.
information, attached. Um, if you're cool
Thank
with
you.
it, why don't you start with this one, Jason?
Okay. Um, for me, when with images like this, the biggest place for improvement is if you're going to center everything, then make sure everything's centered. So like, and it could just be happenstance to the grounds, but like the two brides or sisters or whatever these two girls are, like they're centered between the door and the pillars, but then the bike racks aren't. What is that? Oh, those are benches. Those benches aren't centered. Like you can see all of one bench and only part of another. And then whatever they're standing
Oh
on,
yeah.
you can see the right hand side of it, but not the left hand side of it. And so what this could be is that it wasn't super centered, or whatever they're standing on and those benches just aren't centered. And so if it's the latter where what they're sitting on isn't centered, then you need to find a way to pose them to where you can't include it. Like, and maybe that means moving them off of whatever it is they're on and put them up on the stairs so that you can get a little closer and not include this like concrete thing that they're standing on in the benches because yeah, it's like it's a centered um it's a centered image and everything's like even, but it's not. Like it feels like it should be, but
Yeah.
it's not.
Yeah, that part kind of I don't want to say bothers me, but it is something that I would want to see fixed for sure, and definitely a challenging situation. What how do you feel about the tonality of the image and the highlights and the lighting?
Um I mean, I feel like it's fine. I can
Okay.
see where like the maybe the top was burned and there's like a little bit of a color change, which is fine, but I would take that all the way down to the steps because the steps I feel like need to be the same tonality and brightness as the top of the frame.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I look at it, I can see where it's not perfectly centered. If you look at that center door, you can see a little bit more of the left than you can of
Oh, yep.
the
Mm-hmm.
right. So as the photographer just needs to take like a step to the left to center out that part of it. And because this
Agreed.
is such a wide lens, I feel like that would fix the left-hand side of the frame as far as how it's balanced. For me,
Gotcha.
also, what I would do is I would actually take a step back and shoot wider than I need to because you're shooting at a lower angle up at the models, which is fine, or the subjects. But I would shoot a little bit wider and further back than you need to so that you can, in Lightroom, use the upright tool to make those pillars upright so it doesn't look like they're leaning backwards. And because whenever you bring those to be perfectly vertical, you're obviously going to have to crop in a little bit. So I would intentionally shoot a little bit wider, knowing that it's going to crop in a little bit when you adjust for that.
Yeah, and this is a perfect example of a photo where, as a photographer, you just kind of want to take the extra like 5 seconds to really make sure everything's lined up. Um, so by the way, if you haven't guessed it already by now, a couple people have already guessed it in the comments. This anonymous photographer is actually me. I shot this on Saturday.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So this was the first quinceanera I've ever done, and it was twins nonetheless. So
Nice.
it came with its own set of challenges. Um,
I'm sure.
but and to answer your question, that little platform they're standing on is not actually centered with the door.
Yeah.
So
Good
I
shit.
had it, which was annoyed the crap out of me. So I had to like try. I did intentionally try to center them as best I could, but I was obviously still running into these challenges. But yeah, definitely some great advice. So thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Yeah. All right.
And if
This.
anything, like, if, as long as the whole background is centered, you could easily take the right hand and mirror it to the left hand once
Yeah.
everything else is centered to make just that one section be centered, if that makes sense. But because the rest of the image isn't perfectly centered, which you probably try to like find a middle, like a good middle ground. Um, yeah,
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. Well, super cool. Thanks for appreciate it. Yes, I
sure.
did shoot this with a 14-30 Scott. I used one flash camera right, a Geekoto GT200, no modifier bare flash. For those who were asking. Okay, moving on. This next photo comes from Becky McNerdy. Oh, this is fun. Hold on, I'm just pulling up some info here. This was shot with a Godox A200 with a yellow mag gel right behind the bride on the left, pointed at the door roughly at about where I thought their spell would land between them, and then had another 200 strobe with a diffuser pointed at both brides to the front. So let's see here. I I think for me the highlight of this image, just the strong point, is going to be their expression and how much fun they're having. It's a great, this in my opinion, this is a portfolio worthy shot simply because you captured such a genuine reaction from them. And I think if I was a potential client, these are the kind of photos I would want to see my photographer capturing on my wedding day, because it really is showing that raw, pure emotion. With that said, couple of technical things I would probably fix here. The angle's kind of throwing me off a little bit. So, and what I mean by that is like, the top of the door isn't completely level. You could have potentially taken a step to your left to center it and frame it a little bit more. So I would have gone either one of two ways here, because right now the photo is kind of in this weird in between zone where it's it's close enough to being level, but not close enough to where it bothers you. But it's also not as dramatic of an angle as it could be if you're going to go the completely opposite direction. So I think you're kind of in the middle of two extremes here. You're in the middle of a really well balanced image, from utilizing the architecture and the lines, and complete opposite where you're doing something completely funky, some Dutch angle or something like that. So I would have probably compositionally chose a slightly different, just a slightly different perspective here, to help balance the image a little bit more. But other than that, I mean, yeah, the light's like slightly too flat, but it honestly doesn't really bother me that much because I'm looking more at the moment and the emotion here than looking at it from a technical perspective. Um, Other than that, yeah, it's fun, and I think that's what's most important here. But Jason, I'm curious to see if you see anything else that I'm not seeing.
Yeah, no, I love the fun of it. It took me a second to realize that they're not holding hands. Um,
Yeah, you're
and so
right.
I think they just needed, if they just took like a small step apart to separate those hands out a little bit, it would be more apparent that they're dueling. Like to me, whenever I first saw the image, it took me a second to realize that they were like wand dueling. I thought they were just like doing this weird crazy dance and their hands were up because it's hard to actually see that they're holding wands right off the bat unless I zoom in or like look
Right.
at the image long enough. But if this is like a quick scroll through Instagram type of thing, I would just think that they were like doing this weird laugh as they were dancing.
Yeah, exactly.
And if they took a small step apart, then that light that you want to be like where their spells would meet, it would make more sense because their hands wouldn't be blocking it. It would be in the center of them. And then if you took a small step back, you would include the entire archway of the greenery. And then it definitely needs to be squared up in terms of the tilt and the angles. It feels very wonky the way that it's like leaning with the wide angle. And then again, I would do a bottom burn on the ground. Um, and then I would potentially burn down the top left corner to match the top right hand corner.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Got you there. Yeah, just some minor technical stuff, Becky, that you could change just to help improve your images. I mean, and that's why we're here, right? Just kind of maybe having, Jason or I look at those small things that maybe we wouldn't notice, to help really elevate you to the next level. And that's kind of what these are all about, right? Is my goal for all of you is to always submit an image that you're proud of, but that there's something that needs to take it to that next level. So I think those things that Jason touched up on are exactly what you need to take it to the next level. So, Becky, thank you so much for
That right on the left,
submitting.
oh, I love her laugh.
Yeah. Oh, she's killing it. Absolutely. So, thank you, Becky. Okay, moving on. We got just a few left. This next one comes from Colby Walker. Now, Colby took this photo. It was a college graduation photo. So we took the picture at the college's mascot statue. Since the school colors are purple and gold, I used a 8200 camera left with the yellow mag gel and an 8200 camera right with the purple gel. Then to camera right, I had two 8200s and a 24-inch mag box set on either 1/32 or 1/16 power. So I'm not really sure what the point of using two flashes in the softbox was if you were shooting at that low of power, but that's irrelevant. So I'll let you start, my dude.
I would have preferred if the main light on her that was the mag box had a grid on it, so that we could
Yeah.
flag off some of the light that's on this structure and on the ground, and so that it would only light her. That would also help you get more color on this mascot because what's happening is that the light that's lighting her is also lighting the mascot, which is washing out the color that's able to stick onto this mascot. And then with the mascot light, that purple light, I would try and feather that back behind the pillar just a tad so that it wasn't lighting up the top right hand of this pillar that she's sitting on.
Gotcha.
And then the retouching looks a little bit too much as far as like taking away all of the texture when I zoom in. And then my only other thing, and I'm not sure how I would tackle this, is that I like that you did the colors of the school on the mascot, but it's bleeding into the lighting of the building.
Yes.
And so it's hard to tell that that's what's going on. So I don't know if what I would honestly do is I would probably just shoot at a higher shutter speed and I would just try and kill the light that is from that building because it's not
Yeah.
really adding much to the scene. I would just let that go all to black and make the only thing that's lighting up the scene be what's lighting her, the thing she's sitting on, and the mascot. And then it would be like her, the pillar, the mascot, and then it would just be kind of like black shadow behind her. And again, same thing as before. It doesn't need to be black, black if you don't want it to, but it totally can. Um, but and then also just again getting rid of some of the light that's on all of this concrete or again a bottom gradient burn just to bring it down a bit.
Absolutely. Yeah, and those are some of the comments I was going to make. Bring down the highlights on the ground and the structure. The highlights from the windows are a little strong for me. I'd bring those down. I'm seeing what looks to be like a person standing in one of the windows, kind of towards camera right. I don't know if it is a person, but regardless, whatever that is, I'd probably try to clone it out. And then
Looking through the
finally, I
window,
would.
like what's going on out there?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And then the other thing too, is I would try to remove some of these wrinkles in her dress in post. It's kind of a small nitpicky thing, but there are a lot of tools nowadays that we have access to that do auto remove wrinkles, like Evoto, for
Retouch for
example.
me, they have a plugin to remove
Yep.
wrinkles.
Exactly. So that's something I would probably do now just because it is so easy when we have so many tools available to us. So, yeah, everything else you said, though, I completely agree with Jason. So solid. Solid, solid, solid. Thank you, Colby, for submitting this. We got, I think, 5 more photos. I'm going to try to roll through these. This photo is from, let's see, who is this from? This is from Steve Eaton, and this was shot at Shelburne Farms in Vermont. Used a mag sphere with the CTB behind the ladies. And this is, I feel like this is a very Jason Vinson color palette here. But that would be, well, I guess I'll start. Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I'm just kind of trying to look at the photo here. Because I really do like this composition, and this is one of those images I'm looking at, and I'm honestly not finding a lot that I would change. Maybe what I would change is try to get a little bit more dynamic with the posing, and that's it's always hard with silhouettes because you're really just seeing the kind of the frame of the subjects here. So I think I would maybe have the woman on the left separate her feet a little bit more just to create more of more shape to her body. That would be probably one thing I would do just to create a little bit more visual interest in the pose. But as far as how the image is balanced, I think the lighting and the composition are both balanced very well. I love the fact that you were able to capture like a seagull in the background. I think that's so epic, and what a good moment, whether that was added in post or caught in the moment. I think that's great. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't have a ton to say about this. But Jason, maybe you're seeing something I'm not.
No, I mean, I think it's amazing. I'd love to see the light that's lighting up the wall be just a little bit brighter because it's hard to actually see their silhouettes with the
Mm-hmm.
the texture of the wall. And the brightest part of the frame is going to be the right-hand side where the sunset is. And so that's where your eye instantly goes, and then eventually you find them. So it just needs to be flip-flopped. And so I don't think you necessarily need to make the sunset darker. I think the wall just needs to be a little bit brighter. I would also clone out. There's like a little bit of like the white rock coming out of the person on the right's nose. That's a little
Oh
bit
yeah.
distracting.
Hmm.
You left the light stand in, which is taking away from the silhouette. I would, because the person on the right is wearing like pants and a button up, and then the person on the left is wearing a dress. I'm assuming that one is a little bit more masculine and one's a little bit more feminine. So the feminine one, I would have her kind of split her legs a little bit, maybe come
Yep.
up on a toe or something like that, and just give a little bit more separation between the with the legs, for just to have give her a little bit more of a feminine pose. Um, and then the only other thing is there's at the top right or the top center on the left-hand side, there's two little windows or maybe four little windows where you can kind of see the sky through the trees. Um, I don't mind the two on the right, but the two on the left, I would probably just take out.
Okay.
They're a little distracting for me.
Yeah. Right on.
Other than that, I mean,
And then
that's obviously being very nitpicky, because as a whole, it's amazing.
yeah, yeah. And then one other thing I just noticed looking at the image a little closer is Steve, you left the light stand in.
So
Um,
I said that.
oh, you did. I'm sorry, I missed that
Yeah,
part.
no, you're
I
good. You're
missed
good.
that. It's sometimes it's hard to miss or look at the photo, read the comments, and all that. But
And
yeah, so
pay attention to what, yeah.
exactly, exactly. So cool deal. Well,
I
Steve,
have
but
that light stand.
seriously,
It's a good one.
oh, is it the man? Is it that Manfrotto one? It looks like.
It's either the Manfrotto or Cheetah Stain has a version of it as well. It's like the
Okay.
compact one that you can literally like fit it in a rolling bag,
Yeah,
like a
yeah,
rolling
yeah, yeah.
suitcase. Yeah,
Awesome. No, very cool. Yeah, very cool photo, Steve. That this is
love that
probably
bird.
yeah. This is my favorite photo of yours that I've seen. So kudos to you. Okay, moving on. We're almost done here. This next photo comes from Holly Rosebrug. Holly Rosebrug, and no information on this photo that she has submitted. So I'm gonna let you go ahead and share your thoughts and start here.
So it looks like a composite.
That's what I'm gonna guess as
Because
well.
because it was a composite, I would have gone with bringing the ambient exposure down a little bit. And then as far as lighting, because you're lighting each person individually, you have to be careful with the distance between the light and the subject, when you're doing that, because you're moving the light, because everybody has a little bit different of a luminosity on them. Like
Yes.
the driver is brighter than the two people behind him, and then the person on the right is brighter than the person on the to his right, and then the person on the far left is a little bit darker. So you just want to be careful with that. Um, I don't mind like the pose and how all the guys are standing around. I'm not a huge fan of the guy that's holding his jacket because that just looks a little bit stiff in comparison to everybody else. Everybody is like just kind of chilling, hanging out, and he looks like he's ready to go 007. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I would agree with everything you're saying. That was the biggest, that was the biggest thing that I noticed right off the bat was that they're all lit a little bit differently. And when you are doing this, those composites, like Jason mentioned, Holly, it is very important that you have your light placement. The not only the direction but the distance from the subject the same, so you do have that consistent light on all of them. And that's probably the biggest thing. I would 100% agree about the underexposed background, maybe bringing that down a little bit. It's more of an aesthetic photographer's choice, but the reason why I think that would be important, however, is not only to create more separation between them and the background, but also to highlight the car a little bit more, right? So, the strong sky, in my opinion, is overpowering the shadows on the vehicle, and I would like to see the vehicle highlighted a little bit more. So, you could even, in post-production, you could bring down the sky a little bit and bring up the shadows on the car, and I feel like that would actually make the image a little bit stronger as well. But Holly just mentioned in the comments here that this was her first time doing a composite like this. So for
nice.
Yeah, so for your first
Yeah,
time, Holly, I mean, I think you
better than
did a
what I got my
phenomenal
first
job.
time.
Yeah. Oh, dude, my first composite. I mean, well, I mean, my first
Mine
composite was
didn't mine didn't make the cutting room floor, so
yeah, yeah, no. So they're tough. The only other thing too, from a posing standpoint, is I would probably so the guy in the passenger seat, the window's cutting off him off a little bit, so I'd probably take one step to your right, just so he's not getting cut off as much. And then I would maybe put, you're missing a lot on the front of the vehicle. So what I'd maybe do is put one of the guys that's sitting in the car, take him out and put him on the fender of the passenger side, and maybe having him like leaning over the hood a little bit. So you're adding some more, you're breaking up the image a little bit more, and you're spacing them out a little bit, because you have them all kind of bunched up in the middle, and then you just have one random dude by the wheel, and then so the balance is a little off. So to help balance the image, just put him or someone on that other side of the vehicle by the fender. That way they're spread out better, and you're still seeing the whole car.
yeah, I
So
was gonna add because like the door's open, which is cutting off the guy in the middle. I would just shut the door and then I would remove the guy from the passenger seat and then I would put him somewhere else and then I would drop the camera real low so that the horizon line isn't cutting through everybody's necks.
right,
That way it was just like grass and then sky. And then when you remove the guy from the passenger side and get a little bit lower, because you don't have to compositionally put him in this little tiny box, now you can move the camera to the left to show the front of the car, which this particular car, I feel like the front of the car is kind of like the best part of it.
right,
Because I just the shape of it is very definitive for this model. And so being able to show that would pop a little bit more. And the limitation is that guy in the passenger seat.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, super cool here. We're gonna go ahead and move on.
Great job, especially for your first attempt.
Yeah, absolutely. Holly, you did a great job. Thank you so much for submitting. We're moving on to Patsy Fryman's photos. And this was a portrait taken at ClickCon 2023. I was there in a class on evoking emotion. Teamed up with a model and had to show a certain emotion. We were going for a longing look when you are really thinking about someone you have lost. So I guess, shoot, I keep forgetting who started, but
I think it's you.
yeah, I think it is me too. Um, I'm just kind of like taking this all in. I don't know if the pose really matches the intent of what you're going for. Like when I'm thinking of someone, I don't know if I'm like gonna put my hand on my chin like this. I might like I would see maybe convey myself maybe like burying my hands like in my face or something. And I think her facial expression, is works, but I'm not sure about necessarily about hand placement. It just looks a little too stiff for me. Um, but I do like the fact that you put this in black and white. I think that was a really smart call here, because again, when you're trying to convey emotion in a photograph, removing that color aspect of it really helps you look and pay attention to that moment, as opposed to other potentially distracting elements of the frame. So as far as lighting and everything is concerned, it's fine. In my opinion, I think it works. It's well lit. It's soft. The backgrounds is just enough blurred out to where you're removing all potential distracting elements and you're focusing more on the subject. I might if I were to shoot this, I might have try to go for a little bit more dramatic lighting, since you are trying to portray and convey a really powerful emotion. So that would probably what I would do. What about you, Jason?
Remind me what's the emotion they were going for again?
So they're have to show a certain emotion, which was a longing look, thinking about someone you have lost.
Yeah, because I don't mind the emotion she has, but I don't think it fits what they were
Right.
going for.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, that's outside my wheelhouse anyways. I don't know how I would coach someone into look longingly. But yeah, I mean, the lighting's good. I feel like her necklace is a little distracting the way it's kind of cut off. I would probably either have her take it off or just Photoshop it out.
Okay.
Um, Other than that, like it's lit well. I don't have too much feedback. I mean, there's some blemishes that could be removed that the client would probably benefit from or be happy for, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't, I'm totally fine with not retouching images as well. I usually tend not to retouch very often. Um, but yeah, lighting wise, it's good. I do love the black and white.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that's all I had to say as well. I mean, really, I mean, Chris, it's a well balanced image. It's well lit. There's not a ton I would change really. It's just maybe rethinking how you wanted to convey the emotion through your photograph. So
Which is hard with at an event like that. Like she
it
maybe
is.
had
Yeah.
3 minutes with this person, or maybe there's four people shooting over her shoulder and she didn't actually
Mm-hmm.
get to talk to this person very much, or
Right.
so yeah. So like I feel like in order to coach someone into like a real, in order to have an image feel authentic, is you need to have time with that person um in order to, they actually have to like feel that emotion, right? You can't just be like look longingly and they'll be like, I don't know what that means. Like you actually have to have a conversation and have them
Exactly.
think about, like, tell me a story about a time that you felt longingly for someone and walk me down that road and what it felt like. And you have to give them a place to feel comfortable. And in order for them to be comfortable, they can't be in a booth in front of 50 people for an
Right.
hour and a half. You know what I mean? Um, a great example of this is, have you heard of the photographer Phil Sharp?
I have not. The name kind of sounds familiar, but no.
So probably one of my favorite portrait photographers. He primarily does like actors' headshots and stuff like that, but his work
Okay.
is like a lot of it has a lot. It's like all of the facial expressions, even if they're not like super expressive, they all have a ton of emotion behind them.
Okay.
And there is a YouTuber. Let me think of the name. I think it's Sean Tucker. Is that a
Okay.
YouTuber? Sean Tucker?
I'm not
Something
sure.
like that. I think he recently did a video where he actually got to go to Phil Sharp's studio and did some video behind the scenes of him actually shooting something. Um, but it's very interesting, and I that's the process. That's how you get emotion out of people. So if you're interested in going down that road, definitely check it out. Go to his Instagram. Eventually, you'll see he posted a story about it or things like that. But look at his work, and you'll understand.
Awesome. Yeah, I just pulled up his Instagram real quick for everyone to see, and I can absolutely see what you're saying. Very powerful emotions, very simple like very simple setups, and all like headshots, but just very, very, he does a very good job capturing emotion. So thanks for sharing that. I'm definitely gonna start following him. Um, Cool. All right. Well, hey, thank you so much for submitting that photo. We're going to go ahead and move on. We got two photos left. This next one, oh no, I'm sorry.
3 photos.
Who was, I messed up actually. That was from Patsy Fryman. Okay, this next photo, yeah, three photos. This next photo comes from Chris Zerbas. Um,
Last one was from Patricia from. Oh yeah, okay. And then now
yeah,
we're
so
on
this,
the landscape, right?
exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think here, this person was some background. Chris was driving home one evening, and while driving over a bridge, they noticed the beautiful scene to the right. They finished crossing the bridge, pulled over, and walked to a spot on the bridge to get this photo. So I think for me, and probably most obvious, is just it's very over processed, right? It doesn't look, in my opinion, it doesn't really look like a photograph. It looks more of like an artistic uh, expression of some sort of nature scene. So to me, it doesn't look authentic. It looks just a little bit too overdone. So that's all going to depend, Chris, though, on what your goal is and what you're trying to accomplish, right? Maybe this was your intention, was to create more of an artistic rendition of something, where you wanted to be more you take a more abstract approach to it. So regardless, of what you were trying to do, I think it's kind of one of those examples of beauty's in the eye of the beholder. But in my opinion, from a technical perspective, I think it's just a little too over processed. I'm seeing a lot of lack of detail here, which for me, when I'm looking at a nature scene like this, I want to be able to, I want to be able to connect with it a little bit more. Um, from a viewpoint of how it actually looked like. But again, art is subjective, and that's just my opinion. But I'm curious to see if you feel the same way, Jason.
Yeah, I would agree that the fact that the river's like super sharp all the way up to the top, but then if you go to the shoreline is very blurred and muddled, and there's
Right.
not a lot of detail. Um, the sky is super amazing, but then you can see where the transition is between the sky and the clouds. Like there's the dark line across the edge of the mountain where you can tell that the sky has been burned down, but the landscape isn't. But then like the right hand side of the landscape is darker, and the middle of it is brighter. Um, so yeah, so I think as far as it being over processed, I think it's fine to over process an image and like really bring out the drama to it,
Mm-hmm.
but you want to be very careful in the transitions between overprocessed and not. So like the sky and the water, while being overprocessed, it's fine if that's the look you're going for, but the transition between those two elements and everything else is very muddy, and like it's either very blotchy or it's very like hard, clean lines where you can tell that there's like very hard detail and then no detail at all. So just think about the way that an image is viewed by a lens. Like there's a definitive way fall off between sharp lines and the fall off between like the out of focus areas. And so you want to make sure that you hold true to those elements as you are processing an image. And if you choose to over process something, keep those elements in line.
Gotcha. That's actually very good advice. So if you are going to process, I think what you're trying to say, to summarize, if you're going to process an image a certain way, you need to make sure you're consistent across the board with that photo. Um, so, okay, awesome. Thank you so much. All right, we got two photos left, and we got to hop off in eight and at 10 minutes because I have a call. I have a client call at 8. So we're gonna go ahead and blow through these next two photos. This next photo also is from Radon Burton. Looks like this was a family photo, a Geekoto GT200 camera right about 10 feet from the client's, shot with a R6 and a 7200. Child was not into the shoot, so I just told him to interact with her.
Great advice.
That happens a lot. That happens a lot in
Yeah.
these family shoots where they're just not in the photos. Um, so having them interact is a great idea. Uh, I'll let you start here, Jason, since I
Yeah.
started last time.
So posing wise, letting them interact, I think it's great. When you're doing that, for me at least, I just overshoot. It's harder when you're using flash because you have to wait for your recycle speeds and stuff like that. But I would have loved this moment where the flower wasn't blocking the dad's face. Like I would have loved if that flower was just like in that little gap between the daughter and the father so that you could tell that he was still smelling it, but you could see his lips in the frame and still have that facial expression. And maybe you have elements of that where you can kind of composite it together if that's something that you're willing to do. I don't tend to do any composites, so I would try and capture that in camera. And then on repeat again, I would just burn the bottom up because you have such a big soft light, it's lighting all of the foreground. And so the ground is being lit the same as the subject. And so I would just burn that bottom edge just a little bit. And I think you'll be surprised how much that brings your focus into the family. But other
Yeah.
than that, I think it's great. I love the sun kind of coming through. I love the depth of field. Um, I love her facial expression. My daughter does that facial expression all the time, and it's super cute. So yeah.
No, definitely. I 100% agree. Only two things I would add. I would bring up the white balance from the light going on them to kind of match the sun a little bit more. It's the color tones are a little bit more muted, a little more cool in the foreground, and I would really like to see that come up a little bit warmer. I would also crop it in from the top left just a little bit more, because you kind of the big visual interest in the scenery here is that sun coming through, and I would like to just bring a little bit more attention to that, and also frame them a little bit more centered as well. So those would just be the two
It also
things.
seems like it's leaning. I don't know if it's their head height, but it seems like it's like tilted to the right a little bit.
Yeah, I could see that. So, all right. Well, Rodon, thanks
Yeah.
for getting 2 photos in. I don't know how you managed that this time,
Oh,
but we're gonna go ahead and go to our final photo. This
it's
photo,
crap. It's terrible.
it's actually really terrible. I don't. We don't need to actually give any sort of feedback on it because it's just so bad, and there's nothing that we can do to fix it. So whoever shot
Throw
this,
away your camera.
just throw it away. No, just kidding. This is an amazing photo from the one and the only Amber Henry, and this is so cool, and it looks like, yeah, I'm actually really curious to how she lit this, but I love
She has it behind
the
the scenes on her Instagram. She did like a reel about it. I feel
oh,
like
did she? Okay,
I saw it at some point.
gotcha. I almost kind of want the photo to like be tilted a little bit more. So like rotate it a little bit more counterclockwise, because I find myself when I tilt my head like this, I have a slightly better connection with the model. I don't know if you're seeing it.
No, I'm almost the other way. I'd almost want to tilt it clockwise if I were going to tilt it
Yeah,
at all.
yeah, you could do that too. I think we're basically in that weird in between spot. I mean, this is obviously a killer photo, and let's kind of dive into this from a competition perspective. What would you do if you're like judging this from a really high level? What would you want to see different, if
It
anything?
needs to be pulled. It needs to be pulled back like 3 inches, because it's cutting off her knee. So
Okay,
I just want to see all of her knee. Um, and then I al I always like to do just like a quick round and look at all of my edges. And so doing that, I would actually, so she's holding this like bundle of flowers. So there's like one, two, three flowers, and then there's one that kind of goes out of the frame. And I would love that to just be all white flowers so that, can you see what I'm talking
gotcha.
about? So it's just the three
Absolutely.
flowers, and this one that's out of focus that goes out of the frame, that one's just gone and it transitions into it. So I think, or it maybe pulling back enough to see her knee would be pulled back enough to see all of what that flower is, just so the edges are completely clean. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you're
I think
saying
that's
that
my
either,
only,
yeah, either pull it out, the whole frame out more, or come in even more. One of the two.
yeah, like, yeah, so I would either pull out so you can see all of the knee, or I would crop in so you couldn't see her legs at all,
Right. Mm-hmm.
which
Yeah.
might be, that might be hard. I don't know. Aspect ratio, that'd be, you might cut into her hair a little bit, but I prefer to see more flowers, so I would pull back like just enough to see her knee. And honestly, like content to where the whatever the Gen Fill, like I guarantee you Gen Fill would probably do that perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Joanna, don't stroke Amber's ego too much, okay? This is a very good photo, but the definition of perfection, I don't know. Amber already has a pretty big head for such a small girl, so I'm just kidding, Amber. Amber, thank you so much for submitting this. I always love seeing your work. It's absolutely incredible. Jason, thank you, dude. This was absolutely amazing having you on. I've been a big fan of your work for a long time now. And I know we haven't been able to spend too much time together outside of like photo conferences and stuff, but I do always appreciate you, weighing in, giving your 2 cents on stuff, and even just taking the time to talk to people that have questions. You're a super nice guy, super creative. You're very, you're very humbling, and thank you. Seriously, thank you so much.
I'm excited. I was excited to be here. I'm thankful. I'm excited to go through the comments and see what other people thought of the images. And yeah, everyone did a great job. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Before we sign off, any closing thoughts? Where can people find you? Anything exciting you have coming up, or anything you just want to share with the world?
I think just same stuff. If you want to learn from me, Patreon's probably the best bet as far as consistent content. Although on my Instagram, I do share a good amount of behind the scenes and image walkthroughs and talking about lighting and all that fun stuff. I also do like to make fun of the occasional natural light photographer. So if you don't like that, then maybe don't follow along. Or follow along if you're open to that. And then yeah, other than that, Instagram's probably going to be the best bet as far as keeping up with any sort of future workshop announcements and stuff like that.
Perfect, man. Well, hey, again, really appreciate your time. It was so awesome having you here. I hope to see you soon. I'm going to check out that, your family photos from the last 50 days that you posted. I haven't had a chance to look at those yet, so I'm really excited to dive into those. Thank you again.
They're on there if anyone wants to see them.
Definitely. Before we go, I do want to announce the winner that I randomly selected for the Pro Prints canvas. That randomly selected winner is Ed Ailman. So Ed, congratulations. Well deserved since you regularly submit to these. Go ahead and send me a message. I'll get you that promo code. And as always, photographers, I want you to stay classy, stay sassy, and be dope nasty. Have a good one, guys.